everybody, and welcome back to Mythology Monday. Actually, wait a minute. I think today is a crown day. Why? Because I want it to be a crown day. There we go. And we're talking about castles, so I mean, let's do that. All right, welcome back to Mythology Monday, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about Hessen and Heppenheim and the architecture of old Germany. So if you'll remember last week, I told you about the fables and the stories from my hometown of Heppenheim and how they influenced parts of my story in that. And I said this week we would be talking about the architecture and the castles. Now, I went to Germany every summer to visit my grandparents because my mom and my dad's parents and siblings, all of them were in Germany. So my dad's parents flew me to Germany every summer, and I would spend the whole summer, like 6 weeks of my summer vacation, with my family in Germany. That's why I speak German as well as I do. But my uncle Uwe, who I previously mentioned in my other video, who is super awesome and super cool, would take me on all these grand adventures. And even now when I go visit Germany, he still takes us on the grand adventures. And so when I was little and when I went with my husband, who was then my boyfriend at the time, he took us to a castle called the Auerbacher Schloss. Now, Auerbach is the name of the city it's in, but if you remember my lesson from last week, Schloss is castle, Berg is fortress. So this is an actual castle. And what I remember the most from this castle as being a kid was that this castle was so old and so cool. Like, you can go down into the basement, you can see like the bars on the windows where the dungeons had been and that. But what I love the most about the Auerbacher Schloss is there is actually a tree growing on the top of the castle. So like they have those big those walkways that are on the outside of the castle where the guards and the knights would go and watch for trouble and to see who's trying to come into the castle and that. But this particular castle, again, everything in that area is like 1400 years old. This is like, we're talking 500, 600 BC, no, AD. And that's how old the structures and the stuff is. And there was an actual gigantic tree that had a seed had been dropped on one of those walkways, and that sucker had grown to be so big that as a kid I couldn't put my arms around it. And it just amazed me that this tree could grow in a castle where there wasn't like dirt on the top for the roots to really take root in that. And so in the Verlassen castle in my book, the one where Alex's mother had, and that this particular castle has that. It has a tree that has grown its way through the castle because the concept of nature taking back or taking over this giant stone structure was just amazing to me. And in a world of magic where we have earth magic and plant magic and everything coming together, and you hear about certain magical lines getting along with others and certain ones fighting with each other, the idea of the plant growing through the stone, I loved it. I thought it was amazing, so I had to put that in my book. So when Alex finds the Verlassen castle, there is that exactly. This tree that is growing through the castle walls and that they have to like climb under the branches to get down the hallway, because I could picture that in my head and I just had to use it. The second one that has influenced me is the one I spoke about last week, the Starkenburg. This is the fortress that is in the mountain in my hometown. This is the one I know the best of all of them. Literally, as a child, my parents' vineyard and their like growing plant garden area was they had property at the very bottom of this mountain. So I spent my childhood walking up this mountain every summer, multiple times every summer. When my husband and I visit, he literally runs up the mountain every day for exercise. And so, but there's also like trails you can go through the vineyard. So when you go up the property of people's vineyards, you come to the end, like the top of it, there's a road there. And then you can go through these little hidden paths, but only if you have land there and you know about those paths, can you like hike up them and end up at the top of the castle. So I have taken both the secret routes that go like literally along the side of a mountain, and you look down and you're like, oh look, if I fell now I'd die. That's nice. I need to just keep going. But I know the secret ways and the normal ways you take by car. That's just a cobblestone road that loops around the mountain and that. But I remember hiking up these, and this is a fortress. So it has the outer protective wall. It has the giant columns that are cylindrical in that. And so this castle is very much Dayton in my head. It has the fortress walls. It has a wall that would go around the town. There wasn't actually a big wall that went around Heppenheim, but I like to think there should have been. And then it has the cylinder shaped, not square, they're cylinders, circle towers that go up, which is where Aaron and Daniel had their room on one side and where Murloc and Majestai have their rooms on the other. And so this is the castle in my head that I picture. So if you want to go look it up, it's Starkenburg, spelled like this. You can Google it and you can see what the Starkenburg actually looks like today. It did burn down a couple of times, which is where that one joke about Majestai burning down a tower comes from, because it actually happened to the castle that I based Dayton off of. So art imitates life. And the last thing that has influenced me is specific things at different castles. Now, my uncle has taken me to a slew of castles. So many that I don't even know the names of all of them, but I've been to Strandburg, I've been to the one in Schloss, I've been to the Auerbacher Schloss, the Frankenstein Schloss, yeah, there's one nearby, Burg Frankenstein. There's also the Heidelberg Schloss. I've been to so many of them now, I've lost count. But one thing that I love about them is you get to, they kind of like, it's almost like pioneer villages that we have over here where they set up how medieval life was. So some of them still have the old wells that were there originally. And you can see the well in the middle of the courtyard inside this like giant castle or fortress where they would get their water from. Or they have like set up cooking places and that. And if I can make the pictures work, I'm going to paste a couple of my favorites up here. But I really loved being able to see like how they cooked. And that really influenced me when I was picturing the camp and describing how they were cooking in the camp. When I picture the fire pit and the spit and everything over the fire, I'm not picturing what we would think of from like the 1800s. I'm picturing this really ancient iron thing that was put over there in the castle itself. And so I love that kind of ancient history. Some of them even had like those iron cages still hanging up on them that they had found inside the castle, and they kept them for prosperity. And some of them you could even like touch and go into and that. So all this kind of ancient life stuff that we've seen is where a lot of my little details in that have come from. Just because I find it so fascinating, and I have books on the history of Hessen and that, going back and being able to see what life in the kingdom or in the town of that area is. And that's one of the reasons that Dayton is based on Prussia or ancient Germany, because it is very, throughout history, the Germans have always been like the Romans. They're always trying to get more land and be very growing massively and strong, which is what I've always thought of Dayton as. They're not as like progressive or family nurturing, and I'm not saying Germans aren't, because they are fantastic, but historically speaking, they've been more conqueror type kingdom. And so that's one of the reasons that I use a lot of those little details in that for Dayton, because I feel historically the area that I come from has been more of a conquering type nation. And so a lot of those little details have worked their way into Dayton, which I enjoy very much. Especially because King Emmerich is based on my Opa, which is German word for grandfather. Also, you'll find that because I'm German, I sneak German words into my books all the time. So there's random things in there that are actually just German words. And if you don't speak German, you have no idea. But I know, and a handful of people who read my book who speak German know as well. So for you guys, I'm sorry. They're fun words, and I'm sure you appreciate that. But yeah, so German history and medieval architecture is definitely alive and well in my book, but I do try to change it up from kingdom to kingdom because I want all my kingdoms to be unique the same way that all the countries in Europe and the world are unique. So thank you for joining this week's Mythology Monday. I hope you learned something, and yeah, I hope you guys have a great day and happy reading.